7th Riverfront Design Review meeting. First item on the agenda is roll call.
Anthony Black.
Present.
Scott Howard.
Present.
Brian Doherty. Paul Dedman.
Present.
John Joyce.
Here.
Don Casperite. Jillian Robles. Richie Split. And David Yost. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of the January 7th meeting minutes, which are included in your packet.
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Devon. Second by Mrs. Robles. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, item number 3, is cases withdrawn, and there are none. Item number 4 is continuance requests, and there are none. Item number 5 is the consent docket. There are no items. Items number 6, cases for individual consideration. And there are none. Okay. Item 7, other business. PUD 01611 at 1701 Southwestern Avenue, the Western Gateway District. Would you like to introduce this?
Yes, this is a PUD that would provide for the Wheeler District. About early last summer, late last spring, you heard a presentation about the plans for Wheeler District, where the Ferris wheel is going to be a mixed-use, walkable community south of the river around the old air park. So what you guys heard about a year ago was conceptual design standards and ideas on how it would look and how it would function. Since then, and what you have before you is the legal zoning of how it would happen. And there are a couple of things to point attention to. One is that the PUD would change the threshold for certificates of approval requirements. Like, for example, projects, if the PUD were adopted, projects less than 20,000 square feet would not be required to get a CA. In the current regulations, single-family housing is exempt regardless of size. And the applicant will make a presentation and give you some more graphics. Projects greater than 20,000 square feet would get a CA. Projects that are land is divided up into 5 tracts. The projects along the riverfront and along the western street front would come to committee for approval. Projects on the interior of the lot would come for administrative approval. The projects would be evaluated against the design requirements of the PUD and the Wheeler District Design Guidelines. So that's the change of threshold is one thing I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of. The other was right now the air park is mostly zoned some industrial uses, and industrial uses have kind of a limited types of uses that can be developed in industrial lots. The Wheeler District is proposing to use DTD2 as the base zoning. DTD2 is right now covers most of west of downtown, so it's a huge range of uses because you want your downtown to have just about any type of project that would make a lively urban life. So they're proposing that DTD2 uses be the underlying zoning, and none of the uses that are currently restricted in the scenic river guidelines would otherwise be allowed. So staff felt that because of the detail and quality of the proposed design guidelines that would be enforced by property deed restrictions and by an internal town architect review, that the design standards were equal to or greater than what we currently have in Scenic River, and that's why in our staff report we recommended approval. But the applicant is here to answer any and all questions.
Good morning.
Good morning. David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. Also with me is the applicant and developer, Blair Humphreys. First, I'd like to thank Ms. Cronster and all the staff. This has been a long process getting to this point. As you might imagine, this is a unique project that was going to require a unique planned unit development that this city, frankly, hasn't seen before. We think it's always been everybody's desire that this site and this project be a true urban mixed-use development, continue some of the momentum that we have downtown and that is coming south towards the river, and now we'll have something that will bring momentum south of the river. So what we started out with was our basic design, what we wanted to do. You can see here and here we've laid it out into various tracks. To my left is what's on the screen before you as well. It's showing the streets, it's showing that we're keeping and respecting where the current runway is, but then mixing in a series of buildings to highlight where we are on the river, close to downtown. What we wanted to do is to make sure that planning staff, development services, as well as the building permit division was all comfortable with this, because this is going to be a project that's going to take buy-in and support from everybody, from the developer, from the citizens, and certainly staff. And what we think we have now is a PUD that staff is comfortable with. My client is certainly comfortable with. Ms. Cronster did mention the threshold changing. I'll let Mr. Humphrey speak to the specifics of the design and the project. One of the things I want to make sure you understand is we're continuing to respect the river and Western Avenue. We know that that's very important, so we're certainly not trying to withdraw any consideration that this committee might have. But you imagine a site and project of this size, there needs to be some ability to move forward with the development without every single structure having to come before a committee. You can imagine for someone trying to market a project and sell parcels in a project, perhaps, it would create significant nightmares. So what we've done is, when you look at the track map, the bright red, again, is considered tract 1. As Mrs. Cronster said, everything above 20,000 square feet would require approval by this committee. We tried to keep the conditions the same as they are now under the ordinances. But what you have is a series of step-downs as you move away from the river and away from Western Avenue as you get more towards the interior of the project. And as you get more towards the interior of the project, what we'd like is the ability to move forward with developments without having to come with every single construction project before a committee. One of the things that we believe justifies this is we have integrated into our PUD significant design guidelines, greater than what would be required under the city ordinances today. So we hope that this committee feels comfortable. We believe that the planning staff, development services, and the building permit division feels comfortable with that approach. Within the PUD, and I'm not sure if you guys have copies of the PUD, but within the PUD what you see is a table. There it is on the screen. And what this table is intended to do is to detail for all projects that are less than the 20,000 square feet, what items still come before the committee and what items would be simply permittable. And you can see that the majority of everything, even if less than 20,000 square feet within tracks 1 and 2, are still going to require committee approval. Anywhere you see SR means we're going to come back before the committee for approval. And it's a sliding scale as you obviously get away from the river and Western Avenue. So we understand that this is a unique approach, but this is certainly a unique development that we think justifies a unique approach to how we do things in this city. I'm going to let Mr. Humphreys explain his vision and this project. I'd be happy to answer any questions as to the PUD and the way that the process will work, if there are any. Okay. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Humphreys.
Thanks, David. Chairman Black, committee members, excited to be back before you. We've been hard at work on this. We've owned the property since 2006. We've specifically been working on this Wheeler Master Plan for over 2 years. And we're excited that this represents, I think, a tangible step forward. We continue to be under construction on the Ferris wheel. It'll be open this summer, certainly in time for July 4th. And we have the piers down and the foundation being poured and some amenity buildings going up. So we're excited about that. And we're excited to get going on phase one of really the heart of the development. This has always been envisioned to be a mixed-use urban neighborhood. That vision started with the Oklahoma River Master Plan in 2002, and that vision continues. It's something that we've taken kind of the base vision that was put in place by civic stakeholders over a decade ago, and we've attempted to just flesh it out with details, with market opportunities representative of where the market's at today, and really with the goal of creating a neighborhood that accomplishes for the South Side and for the Oklahoma River what Midtown and Mesta and the Plaza District are accomplishing in North and Northwest Oklahoma City. So we see this neighborhood as providing an appropriate transition from the core of the city back into the neighborhoods. And that's why we've taken so much care in putting this together, understanding that there is certainly a civic face to this project along the river and along Western Avenue, and then understanding that there's also an interface and a seam between this project and the neighborhoods that surround it. We are in the middle of the Western Gateway node of the Scenic River Overlay. You'll note that the neighborhood west of us is not part of the overlay, and that there aren't currently any design controls there in place. And so there's already is, to some extent, kind of a rough gradient that exists of saying, where does design review, where is it a very necessary and important component, and where we're willing to let things loosen up to allow the market to move forward. And we've tried to be sensitive to that. And so this plan, as you see these tracks that are laid out before you, virtually everything in Tract 1 will come back before you. And as you look at the list of what would come in Tract 2, you can see that very much the majority of every major effort would come before you in Tract 2. The key is that face, that urban face, what people experience as they move past on the recreational trails of the river, as they move past on a Devon boat, or as they drive down Western Avenue, that an appropriate civic body will remain in control of approving those design elements. Our design guidelines, I'll just tell you that this isn't a situation where we're saying you can make it pretty on the outside and then let us go crazy on the inside doing all kinds of ridiculous stuff. Because of our ownership of this property, we have over 150 acres. And the way that this development sets up is it's very much it's a value capture on the back end. We hope to break even on phase one, but for the project to be successful, we have to build quality and build a brand and build a place that people want to be in the early phases of the project so that we can capitalize that on the later phases of the project. In order to do that, there's going to be an attention and care with the quality of the development and the internal design standards to ensure that this is a place that is creating long-term value, that it's a virtuous cycle where every new building that comes in actually makes the place better, and that it becomes, over time, a place that really fits into not only people's understanding of what the South Side possibilities are, but really what a great neighborhood in Oklahoma City should be. So I've showed you all the renderings before, and we don't have new renderings. We're really ready to turn the renderings into real buildings, but happy to answer any questions, talk through other specifics of the PUD, or just get any of your input on it.
I got a question. So kind of just explain to me just sort of a scenario that this is going to prevent from happening, where the review kind of just is kind of cumbersome enough to sort of queer a deal or something. Kind of give me an example of just how something like that might.
Yeah. So in terms of, so if you take there's already, as mentioned, a protection in place for single-family homes. And if our project is really relying on creating kind of that, what we'd call a missing middle component. So it's the duplexes and fourplexes and eightplexes that really create great urban neighborhoods. And so you might have a project there that is, 5,000 square feet. It's actually 4 units. But to take a project that's on the interior of our site and add an additional 90 days, you actually start looking at what it takes for a filing preparation, filing, and that additional, even the filing fee itself actually becomes a real consideration when we look at our overall cost. It might make sense for us to be able to move forward on that and say tract 3 or on the interior of the site in tract 2, but we also understand that the city has to maintain appropriate controls given the investments they've made in the river. And so trying to figure out where that threshold was, we know that there should be a threshold and a gradient somewhere. The city is, in the current scenic river overlay, has said basically the threshold is if you do a single-family house, no design review. If you do anything else, design review. And we've tried to create a little bit more nuance to that, both in terms of what those projects are, not just from a square footage standpoint, but really a combination of what is the project square footage, what is the project type, and then where does it exist along that geographical gradient, moving away from the civic feature of the river and Western Avenue and back into a neighborhood that currently doesn't require design review. And so this has been the approach that we came up with after a lot of discussion on the topic. We also did feel that it was important on the other side to protect the neighborhood. The neighborhood it's challenged. It has a combination of R1 zoning and industrial zoning, which is atypical. But we did feel that it was important to say, the density and the quality of the urbanism that we're going to do in Wheeler could be fairly different from what's currently existing there, where you have small houses typically under 1,000 square feet. And so they're creating a density gradient that transitions, really stepping down that urbanism to where it would appropriately acknowledge that seam between Wheeler and the neighborhood. I do want to point out on the plan, one of the things we've taken great lengths to do is to connect to the neighborhood. That was something that was specified in the Oklahoma Master Plan and is adopted into the code, specifically really featuring that 15th Street connection, which is a vital connection, and it's much needed to move from, you currently cannot move from north of 20th Street east without coming back down across the creek and around or going up Exchange and over. But we would add 15th Street as well as connections north of that, a new 20th Street connection, and then even on the streets where we weren't able to make an auto connection just because of the way that the grid laid out and connecting to our plan, we have provided for pedestrian connections that will allow pedestrians and bikes to continue to move through seamlessly. There's a couple other interesting elements to the PUD that I think are worth pointing out, and I don't want you to get don't want you to worry about what's intended. You can see one of the approved uses is for mobile homes, and it is not our intention to create an RV park, but we have caught on to, and with the input of our charrette process, there's a real interest in tiny homes, and it's an odd thing. We'll see if it's a long-term interest or if it's a flash in the pan, but there's a number of millennials within the younger market that are interested in living in simplified tiny homes, and often those homes, in order to take advantage of the code requirements associated with houses versus houses on wheels, are put on trailers. And so that's why that is in there in the code. We've limited that use to no more than 10% of any tract. So it will not be a substantial component of what we're doing. It's just thought that these could be accessory units or part of a cottage court that would ultimately add to the vitality and kind of the incremental organic nature of Wheeler. Other questions? Can I answer?
Could you describe what, in your view, a tiny home in your project would be like? What size and so forth?
Yeah, there's a range. So the smallest is we've kind of surveyed what's out there. People who really want to go tiny, and it's nano, is about 140 square feet. That's a shoebox by any standard, I think. We think that there's probably an opportunity to do stuff in the 250 to 400 foot range, and then certainly as you get in, you can start to build small houses on a foundation at approximately 400, 500 square feet. It's clear that this is not a deep market. This is not representative of what the majority of buyers out there would want. But we think that in small doses, it can be complementary to the overall neighborhood.
Blair, pertaining to the tiny houses, are storage containers allowed or proposed to be allowed as a living type unit?
Say that again?
The storage containers, the steel structures, I know you're using some over by the Ferris wheel, but I've seen some applications where storage containers are actually converted into living spaces.
I guess that is one potential outcome of this. That's not really our intention. It doesn't fit within our design guidelines in terms of what the appropriate roofing material would be, the appropriate aesthetic of a more traditional proportion in terms of the architecture. So that's not our intention. I don't know whether it's technically allowed. I don't think it fits. I know it's too expensive for what we're wanting to do.
Shipping containers are not specifically addressed in any of the design districts, including Scenic River. It's mainly evaluated in terms of form and material, whether or not it's actually a shipping container. So, yeah, it's clearly, to me, it's clearly doesn't meet the guidelines of what they're proposing, but there may be instances where it's appropriate.
Yeah.
I got a question, Lisa. When you were talking about administrative approval of certain items, does that kind of mean that you guys would dictate, okay, it either meets the guidelines or it doesn't, and there's kind of no, what's the word I'm looking for?
Would there still be the provision for us to take it to committee if it wasn't clear? Yes. Yeah, right now, the threshold is 10,000 square feet, or at staff's discretion.
So your process has been not rushed and very thorough and extremely well done. Time's going to tell how well that's received by the public, and if there's something that causes you to want to amend your current guidelines for any reason, will that go back to staff before implemented?
So the guidelines themselves, in terms of the document that is the development guidelines, they are a living document, and so they're intended to evolve over time. We have worked with staff to take the elements of those that we're seeing as critical guardrails to the development and bake them directly into the PUD. And so you might note that whereas our guidelines have its own section on appropriate design of signage, that was something that staff felt was vital that it be actually in the PUD so that couldn't change or be modified. And so we took the necessary components of that and put that specifically in the PUD. There's examples of that. We're already meeting the bulk standard and setback requirements that are specified in the Scenic River overlay. So that wasn't an issue. We're just adopting those. So we cannot really change the key components that are already in the PUD. Those will be set, and we would have to bring this back to modify those in any way. The design guidelines themselves are basically create this area for nuance that will allow us to dial it in over time as we figure out, maybe this is working well, or maybe this needs to move a little, but it can never move outside of the requirements of the PUD.
Thank you.
Other questions? A couple questions that I thought you might want to note is that I get asked all the time, where will Phase 1 be? And Phase 1 will really be featured around the terminal building. So we expect to have 50-plus single-family homes, over 100 apartment units, approximately a 20,000-square-foot office building, and then a few thousand square feet of retail. Hopefully, like any neighborhood, you want to have that great third place, coffee shop, grocery, something to that effect. And so that's certainly our hope for the old terminal building where the diner was. So that's where you'll see work getting started when we're allowed to move forward, hopefully this fall. And we expect to have homes on the ground ready for the first neighbors to move in by the end of next year. So.
Do we have any more comments or questions? Do I have anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to this? With that, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
The action is to make a recommendation of approval to Planning.
Yes, make a recommendation to the Planning Commission for approval.
Moved by Mr. Howard and second by Mr. Castrite. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Item number 8 under communications. First item, item A, is a presentation by Brent Ward on a informational presentation of the MAPS 3 Lower Downtown Public Park.
Both the upper park and the lower park are moving through their design processes, and the upper park is going to be reviewed by DDRC here in the next month or two. But in all this planning, it occurred to us that we had never even discussed the park with the committee. So, the upper park is from I-40 to the new boulevard, but then there's almost that much south of the river. So we wanted to bring this to you and see if you had any comments.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Brent Worth, the MAPS office, and as Lisa said, we just want to bring this information to you as early as we can, and our consultants with Hargraves Associates. We have with us Brent Wall and Tori Bootser, so I'll let them make their presentation.
Good morning. We have about 60 slides in this presentation, so we're going to try to run through them as quickly as we can. We'd really like to focus on the parks program and sort of how it interfaces with the river and the surrounding community, more so than the sort of the really technical sort of site analysis things. But at any point, please feel free to stop and ask a question, and we'll try to move through it pretty quickly. My name is Brent Wall. I'm a landscape architect here in Oklahoma City. I'm consulting with Hargraves Associates as their local consulting landscape architect. Tori's firm is working on the built structures and is highly involved in all aspects of the design. So I think between the two of us, we can answer most of the questions that have come up. The presentation that is up here now was presented to the Park Subcommittee in late March. This plan will come to you for approval later on. So this is a good opportunity for us to show you what's happening with the design, for you to ask any questions, and then we can then relay those questions back through the MAPS office and ultimately to Hargraves for any answers or anything. So if there's anything we can't answer today, please let us know, and then we can feed that back to the commission. So the location and scope, you can see the south of I-40 is where your jurisdiction picks up. The site is, I'm going to quickly go here, 28.7 acres. Right now it has 5 unique areas, and the budget is about $20.5 million. I do want to quickly touch on the survey results because Hargraves really did a very nice public engagement, and they've solicited a lot of feedback from the community, and they've really integrated the results of that into their plan. So as we move through the design, I'd like to point out some of the ways that they have integrated those results. Here you'll see things like festivals, farmers market, community gardens. Natural areas were very high and very important to the public, bike paths, things of that nature. The lower park is really shaping up to be have a much different feel than the upper park, and more that it's much more natural, and it has more sort of community areas. Kind of the same way that the Wheeler development is sort of trying to integrate that core back to the neighborhood scale. The park is really doing that as well. So I think these design gestures that are happening along the river are really nice in that sense. The park does lie within. There's a tremendous amount of open space along the river trails, Wheeler Park, Wiley Post Park. This whole area just has incredible public park amenities, and I think the lower park is really going to fit very well into that existing scheme. The other thing that it does is it truly connects the core to the shore, and that was always the intention. And it, not only that, but it connects to the river trails, which connects to a much wider network of trails, and starts to get you across the river and then into Capitol Hill area. Hargraves has done a lot of site reconnaissance, just going out, taking pictures, spending time on the site. This image in particular is really important in that it shows that from Southwest 15th, you can actually see the water of the river, and that's really has been really important to try to capture that view and actually connect down to the water. But there are challenges. Looking back to the north, there are a tremendous amount of existing parking lots, disjointed buildings. You've probably all been down there. Here's Harvey Avenue. Here's Western looking to the east. And here's Robinson looking to the west. So the systems analysis, the area that you see up at the top in the red is an area that has actually been surveyed at this time. Everything south of that has not had a formal survey. So we have a basic idea of what the land contours are, how the water is moving across that whole area. That we have an idea of what the topography is at this point, how the stormwater is going to affect the site. Here we do have a 500-year floodplain that covers 85% of the site. Trees, I think this is probably one of the really most important slides here. Once again, the red area at the top are trees that have been surveyed. Everything below that has been surveyed from an aerial. There is an arborist involved in the project who has gone out and assessed the trees, and at the very top it says 8 trees identified worthy of saving. That's a recommendation that will not be followed. I know the design team is very intent on trying to save as many trees in this whole area as possible, and there are quite a few that are definitely worthy of saving. So there's going to have to be, once we survey from 10th Street to the south, we'll go in and have a much better idea of exactly how many of those trees are really worth saving, but we feel like there's quite a few at this time. And at this point, tentatively, there's 288 trees to be retained and about 500, a little bit less than 550 new trees proposed. So that's quite a few. The upper park right now has a little bit short of 1,000 new trees proposed. So, and it's about twice the size. So that kind of starts to speak to how this area is going to really be forested and much more natural than the upper park. Streets, this is just showing the existing transit, the street network around the park, some of the challenges of noise from the highway and such. This is the current parking strategy is to have on-street parking along Harvey and Robinson and along Southwest 10th Street. The graphic on the right, the street section, is a proposed section that is the designers would like to see essentially stretching all the way down Robinson from the boulevard south all the way down into Capitol Hill, but has not been approved or is not funded at this time. So then we get into existing buildings. I'm going to let Tori talk about that quickly.
So there are some existing buildings down in that lower park area. Our firm did a review of those and found those to be primarily in very poor condition. You can see some of the the buildings, the photographs of the buildings there along the street. So they're in poor condition, they're deteriorating, and they are slated for demolition. This is also very necessary for the design of the park to continue that whole promenade down to the riverfront. There have been a couple of signs there you see on the left of your image of signs that we are deemed worth keeping. So we'll keep those, and they will possibly be relocated. Our office is doing 2 structures. One is in the north portion, and it will be adjacent to the sports fields. And then one in the south is right close to the community gardens and city farm. And primarily they are shade structures. Here's an image of that. They're primarily shade for picnic tables, and then there's a component just with enclosed restrooms and concessions. So they're really simple structures. We're basing the architectural language for these just like, or we're taking the form language we used in the Upper Park architectural designs. So very light steel, metal roofs, and brick enclosed components for the more solid pieces.
So now we're starting to get into, this starts to really lead us into the parks program. Here you see the promenade, which will be an extension of the upper park. This is the big wide path that is sort of the main piece that brings you all the way down to the river. And then working off of that is a meandering walk that will work its way through the woodland areas and through the natural areas and give you a much different experience in the park, where one is meant to, it's not meant to fly down, but it's a more direct route. The meandering walk is definitely meant to sort of slow you down, give you that sort of experience with nature as you move through. Irrigation strategies for the park. Currently there are areas that will be high intense or that will be irrigated regularly, and then there will be areas that will receive a much lower water use. The team is trying to be very conscious of our current water restrictions and start to develop the plant palette and the plantings and vegetation on the lower park to not need as much water and support, which we think is a really good idea. So here's really the heart of the program. Up along next to the highway, next to Western and Southwest 10th, you start getting into an active sort of sports area with a soccer field and multi-purpose courts that could be used for tennis or foosball, where they use a hard surface to play a soccer-type game. That area up there would be much more activated, and then as you start to move south, you get into place for a space for a food market, community garden, and then as you really get closer to the river, that turns into more of a festival, performance-type area. So there's only 5 areas right now that are really meant to be programmed, and the rest of the space is really left pretty natural. So here's the events and celebrations. Like down close to Southwest 15th, we have an event, a small event lawn and a stage area where you can have food trucks set up. And that, once again, that's starting to get closer to that community element where if the upper park is close to the convention center, you have lots of visitors, lots of tourists. As you move south, the program changes and becomes much more community focused, much more residential and neighbors and events for neighbors and such as you get down there. And then here's the unprogrammed space, this is a pretty powerful slide, and it shows that, the majority of the park really is meant to be very open and sort of up for interpretation, where if you leave these spaces unprogrammed and natural, those who come to use the park will invent ways to have fun and do things here, which is really interesting concepts. So here's the plan rendered. So up on the north side, you have the sports fields and the multi-purpose courts. You have the promenade leading you down with the woodland lawn. The area called the hollow lawn, that is the lowest part of the site in terms of drainage and topography. So that area will feature some rain gardens and some low-impact development type features that will handle some of that storm water and help clean it before it gets down to the river. So that's meant to be sort of this low, very wooded, very natural area down there. And then you move into the city farm and community garden, which we feel is a tremendous opportunity to connect young people to food sources, to sort of a urban farm-to-table type situation where you can actually harvest produce in the park, have cooking schools or outdoor eating events right there in that farm and community garden area, which is really pretty exciting. And then moving down, you get to the event stage and the lawn where you can actually see the water. And then ultimately a connection to the river trail and the existing amenities along the river.
Can you record?
Sure.
So one thing to point out, so is this community garden and city farm, that whole active area is right next to Manuel Perez Park. And that's a park that's already there, and it's pretty important to the neighborhood. So that was talked about early on with the community to make sure there's a good connection back to that park. So we felt, I think that was part of Harvey's intent, was to make sure there was a good active program there at that node.
So here's an aerial view, basically looking from Robinson to the west, showing the multi-use courts, the pavilion, and this would be a synthetic turf playing field so that it wouldn't get worn out and it would be green all year round. This view is the promenade looking back to the north. So you see the Skydance Bridge in the background, this little panhandle that comes off of the sports fields, and then just really that natural character of the park all the way through here. It has a lot of potential to be really just this really nice green lung for the city and have a lot of environmental performance. This is looking south. Here are the meandering walks, the farm and community garden, and then the glade, what they call the glade overlook, which is a raised area with the stage. This slide just shows a little bit of the potential character of what those sports fields and courts will look like. And here's a rendering looking back to the east of what this could potentially look like with the shade pavilion back here in the back as a gathering point. Woodland lawn. Again, just character. There's potential for a dog park in this area, cookouts, all sorts of just really passive recreation here. The hollow lawn, that low area of the site. Pretty similar type program here, but the character is just a little bit different where we're calling these lenses. This would be a rain garden lens, basically a circular depression where we would channel storm water into and use plantings to help sort of cleanse that water before it gets released out into the river eventually. Community farm and city farm, or community garden and city farm. Once again, just character here of potentially what those items could look like, the sort of community gathering place that they could be. And then the glade lawn closer to the river. A rendering of performance space. I think this in particular has a lot of potential for a really great place to be. Right down close to we can see the water, and just a really nice place to be. I think everybody has seen the potential of just being next to the river. It just makes everything better, I think. And then up here along Robinson, and close to the highway is the Prairie Garden, which is meant to be a very sort of idealized prairie type planting, lots of wildflowers and grasses and attractive wildlife, and really trying to create some place and showing sort of the essence of what Oklahoma is in terms of being a prairie. And then the Robinson streetscape is pretty straightforward, very similar to what you've seen in Project 180 downtown. Really nice streetscapes, nice sidewalks, street furniture, things like that. And the promenade is this just big sweeping gesture that will have really nice big trees all along there, shaded, a really nice place to walk and jog and ride your bike. Here's some character of that. So we get to cost and design. Here's the existing site. Right now, the design that you've seen is this preliminary design budget form. There is an enhanced option over here that is about $4 million more. It does include an additional soccer field, some more arbors, trellis, another shade pavilion, decking at the stage, and irrigation for the entire site. Hopefully, maybe as we move forward, there might be some additional funds, but as it is now, the subcommittee is basically seeing this option as the main option. Hopefully, we can get some more funds eventually. And then the next steps for the site are just continuing with geotechnical engineering, utility, location, all the stuff underground that you have to do before you can really move forward. So that is all ongoing. And are there any questions on the design?
Yeah, I have a question. Where is that? There was a couple on South Robinson. They were like film storage, buildings. No, where is that over here? Is that much further to the north?
That is to the north, yeah. It would
Yeah.
be,
Okay.
up in this area.
So that's not even in our design district, then, right? Okay.
Right. And I will say that I think, Tori's team and the Hargraves team, given the sort of the public engagement with those buildings, they did a tremendous amount of research on all the existing structures at the site to make sure if there was anything that had potential for reuse, and they have been very sensitive to that. Unfortunately, the buildings along there just isn't a lot that's really great.
Right. Yeah, especially in this lower park area, they really are they're just not, there's not a lot worth keeping there.
I guess I'm kind of speaking to that one building that, there was the two kind of film storage, but one was kind of wood frame and the other one was a little more robust, concrete.
Did you see those images here?
No.
This lower park, or the north?
John,
Yeah, I'm talking
you're
north.
talking about the Film Exchange
Yeah.
building. It's north of here, and it's already been demolished.
Okay.
Could you tell me, in the design, is there currently a specific line item that's allocated for budget of maintenance? And how is there a plan for maintain? There's a lot of volume, a lot of square footage of landscaped areas, and in order to keep some of these the way that they were originally intended, from a design standpoint, especially the prairie grasses, it takes a whole different level of maintenance. Is that currently in the plan, and is there budgeting available to implement that maintenance long term?
Well, this is something that's definitely part of the plan. It's not part of our budget or the Hargreaves team's budget for the long-term maintenance, but a lot of the things we're doing are to prepare for long-term maintenance, and there are efforts being made to possibly see if there's a conservancy that wants to keep control or maintain the park. And we're working on that in the upper park as well as the lower park. So there will be an entity that takes care of, that is slated to take care of the park.
Brent, do you want to elaborate on that?
No, she caught right on what the plan is. There's going to be an operator.
The operator hasn't been selected.
No, and it's not been selected yet. And the operator will, obviously, there's been a study already done by Hargraves that shows where potential revenues can be raised for not just the upper park, but the lower park, so that the operator will be able to maintain the park properly.
Thank you. We have no motion or action. Are there any other questions or comments?
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much.
If there's any questions that come up, Lisa is in almost daily contact with Hargraves, I think, so we can feed those questions back to the design team, and she can get them back to you. So there's a lot to digest, and so if there's anything that comes up, feel free to just let her know or let us know.
Thank you. Next item under communications is item B, an administrative approval. Under administrative approval reports, item number 1 is SRCA 13-00032 at 1901 Southeast 15th Street in the American Indian Cultural Center District. Do you have any report on that?
No, I'll mention there's a lot of administrative approvals on your list because we haven't met every month this year. On item number 3 was some changes to some of the Wheeler District stuff that was approved last summer. Lots of little things, a lot of stuff in farmers market area. That's pretty exciting too.
I'll go through the list. Item 2 is SRCA 14-0002 at 800 Southeast 6th Street in the Regatta District. Item 3 is SRCA 15-00007 at 1701 Southwestern Avenue in the Western Gateway District. Item 4 is SRCA 15-00020 at 603 Southwest 24th Street in the Western Gateway District. Item 5 is SRCA 16-00001 at 1300 Southwest 3rd Street in the Farmers Market District. Item 6, SRCA 16-00002 at 1225 Southwest 2nd Street in the Farmers Market District. Item 7 is SRCA 16-00002 at 1225 Southwest 2nd Street in the Farmers Market District.
That's a revision. Those two are related to the Del Mar Gardens Food Truck Park, which I think is, if it's not open, it's about to open.
Okay. And if there are any comments on that? Questions or comments?
Yeah, there was one of those, I don't have my notes in front of me, there was one of those administratively approved items that was some kind of monument or something. Can you pull that out of there real quick? Kind of reminded me of the Finish Line Tower, where it was something that was very small but seemed very significant. I was kind of surprised we didn't see it.
16 by 27 by 17 foot tall structure.
Is it item number 5 at the
Yeah,
report?
that sounds like 17-foot tall structure to me sounds like something we should see.
Yeah, it's that's way on the interior of the lot, and it's all screened by a fence. Like you can't even see. You can't. Yeah, it took us forever to figure out where it even was because it's all screened. So yes, it's. I appreciate your point about the size, but it's small and skinny way on the interior of the lot.
Okay, item C, comments from Planning Department staff?
Yes, if everybody could take a few moments and go to the SurveyMonkey link. We have just Tuesday, we had our first public meeting for to kick off the citywide historic preservation plan. It's a quick survey about just trying to get a gauge of what people feel is historic. You know, what does that mean to everybody, and what should we be doing about some of our historic properties?
And item D is comments from the committee members.
Also note, if you guys have other business or committee meetings starting tomorrow, Walker is going to be closed for the Arts Festival. So over the next 3 weeks, for the rest of the month, if you have meetings here or at 420 West Main, plan ahead.
Or today. Next meeting date is Thursday, May 5th. Do we have anything currently on our agenda?
We currently do not have any cases.
Okay.
So it's likely there will not be a May meeting, but we'll make that call in another week or two.
Okay, and with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment. So moved. Second. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.